Adam, what's going on, man?
Hey, man. Round 2.
I know. We made it. We made it. Episode 2. We didn't stop after episode 1, so I'd call that a minor success. But guys, welcome in. Underlying Principles, episode number 2. I am your host, as always, Blake Hampton, at Blake A. Hampton on Twitter. And as always, my best pal, Adam Hutchison. You can find him at TheRealAdam_H. Adam, talk to me.
Are you wearing green? I can't tell.
No, actually, I'm not wearing green. Well,
That's a virtual pinch. That's a virtual.
Is this green enough under this?
That's why it was confusing me. We might allow that. The judges might allow that.
Okay, we'll have to look online to see what color schemes are acceptable in this time. But during college basketball, I am repping the University of Kansas, who is playing tonight past my bedtime. But I will stay up for the good of the University.
That's what I like to hear. That's what I like to hear. That's a true fan right there, man.
Purdue playing tomorrow?
Purdue's playing tomorrow at 2. I told my boss I'm done after 1. Don't ask me to do anything. I'm going home to watch the Boilermakers play. So, yeah, dude, man.
Honestly, it's a pretty good time. I actually spent most of my day working from my couch today, just watching college basketball, watching Iowa ruin my bracket.
Yeah, that sucked. I will say college basketball doesn't stink, though. I mean, I think Thursday and Friday of college basketball season, when March Madness tips off, that needs to be a holiday. The people need those days to watch basketball. It's some of the best basketball that's played all year round. On that opening round, you get a lot of upsets like you were talking about. I'm sure there'll be some tonight. I'm sure there'll be some tomorrow, but hopefully they won't be Kansas or Purdue.
I know, man. And I always make a bracket with like a bunch of upsets, and I always pick the wrong ones too. It's always the ones that don't happen, and it's always disappointing to me.
Now, how does the analytics guy that's all about numbers and like weighing percentages of how have you not exploited that market yet?
It's a great question, but I actually looked this up because my wife and I were talking about it. To get a perfect bracket, it is a 1 in 9.2 quintillion odds of it happening. So you can try and exploit all you want to on it, but odds are it's just not going to happen for you.
Yeah, that's tough.
We'll jump right into it. There's a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, man.
I mean, right now, this little knee-jerk reaction, this has to be one of the craziest weeks of the offseason in NFL history with all this stuff that has been going on. We talked a lot about the QB shuffle last week, but we have some breaking huge news that happened just today that we can go ahead and just get kicked off starting right now. We have Dari Agumbawale signing a 2-year, $3.3 million deal with the Houston Texans. I mean, I've talked about him for the last 3 years, and now he gets his big payday on the Houston Texans. Adam, what are your thoughts?
Somebody's got to carry Rex Burkhead's pads, right? I mean, that's probably what Dar is looking at. No, man, I mean, anything can happen in Houston. He's got a shot. I mean, he's always produced well. I know he's been your fantasy darling. I have big hopes for him, but I'm going to be cautiously optimistic. We'll put it that way.
The thing is, he's got to beat out Rex Burkhead, who will play forever. He's the Infinity Stone who will always kill your dreams of your potential standout running back. Unfortunately, Dari Agumbawale is going to be he does fit the equation for what I am looking for, which is a good pass catching upside running back who I think is the best value in an ambiguous backfield. So unfortunately, I will continue to be rostering him on a lot of teams, and he will probably let me down continually once again this season. But there is a path for him to actually get some touches, and I cannot wait to be fooled by that once more.
If he breaks out, if he has a great season, I will be the first one to congratulate you on this show that Dari Agumbawale is finally fantasy relevant and has sustainable production.
I mean, hey, 2 years, $3.3 million. That is nothing to sneeze at. Good for him.
No, no,
Congratulations, Dari Agumbawale.
absolutely.
All right.
Way to go, Dari.
We'll go ahead and get to the actual big news on here. Davante Adams traded to the Las Vegas Raiders from the Green Bay Packers. We actually just got news in. I don't know if you saw what the compensation was for the Green Bay Packers in return. Originally, it was rumored that they were going to get a first-round pick this year, a couple of additional picks, and a player. As of a few minutes ago, from Tom Pelissero, I think that's how you pronounce it. I may be mispronouncing his name, but they have said that Green Bay is getting a 2022 first-round pick and a 2022 second-round pick. No additional picks, no additional players to that. How are we feeling about that?
Not great if I'm Aaron Rodgers and a Packers fan. I mean, I don't think he was gonna net you multiple first round picks. We talk about Davante Adams kind of getting past that age apex in terms of fantasy production. NFL GMs know all about how many good years that he probably has left. So I think first and second round draft capital is probably fair for Davante Adams, but I think in terms of what that leaves the Green Bay Packers wide receiver room looking like is another question. I mean, how do you feel about it?
I mean, I don't know what the Packers are doing. I mean, it feels like they just traded away their second most valuable player after spending $50 million a year on their best player. And I don't know if those two are related. I saw some stuff about Davante Adams being just so unhappy with the team that he wasn't going to play for them regardless. I don't know. But right now you're going into the NFL draft and the rest of this offseason with Randall Cobb and Allen Lazard is your wide receiver one. And for a team that just spent $50 million a year on a quarterback, or is it on an aging quarterback over the next 3 years, you would hope to have some better weapons in place than that. And you're not bringing back Zadarius Smith on the defensive side. I just don't know what this roster is going to look like coming into this next season.
Yeah, it's bleak for sure. And if I see one more person say Allen Lazard season, I'm going to start blocking people on Twitter. I've about had it with that take. And
I have so much Allen Lazard.
I think he's a good player. I have some of them too, but let's not overreact here.
I mean, there's a reason Davante Adams got 35% target share over the last 3 seasons, and it's because Allen Lazard is not taking targets away from Davante Adams.
Exactly. That's my point.
But for the Raiders, I'm so tired of the AFC West right now. As a Chiefs fan, I'm exhausted of watching this. I'm ready for everyone to just stop. Good for the Raiders getting Davante Adams. That's cool. Congrats, Tommy. On his fandom for the Raiders, but I'm not happy. I think it's going to be a really tough division, and I think Derek Carr becomes a interesting quarterback heading into next season and potentially beyond with new wide receiver one on the team.
Yeah, I think the AFC West is going to be stacked. I bet the Chiefs still win it. I mean, it's going to be funny when all these teams make these big moves and then Kansas City's just still on top.
I hope so, man. I certainly hope so. We'll go ahead and move on to Julio Jones. I think he was released. And question, is this the end for Julio Jones?
I mean, it's tough. Julio's been not only a great fantasy wide receiver, but a great NFL wide receiver for a long time, putting up insane numbers. A lot of questions that I get regarding players, it has to do with those hamstring injuries. And when we talk about Julio Jones, I mean, hamstring injuries have just really crippled him over the past couple of years. Looking at specifically wide receivers that deal with these type of injuries, these soft tissue injuries regarding hamstring, the average recurrence rate for those players to have another hamstring injury during the same season as the original injury is around 20%. So not so bad. For Julio Jones, it's been around 75%. That's an insane number. In 2020 and 2021, he had 3 recurrence injuries of the same hamstring injury flare up, and caused him to miss at least 1 game after he returned to action. I think we definitely have started to see the decline of Julio Jones. He's going to be probably a very affordable asset in fantasy next year, even depending on where he lands. But I just don't think you can really count on him consistently to be in your lineup week in and week out.
Yeah, I agree. I was kind of skeptical on him when he joined the Titans. When you see that decline of those aging wide receivers, even from an injury standpoint, it's really tough for them to ever come back. There's not a lot of historical data of those 30-plus-year-old wide receivers who go down for the year or have a bad season and then are able to jump back. It would be an outlier at this point for him to find a team and be successful. He may find a good role for a team and some team may be able to find a use for him, but at this point, I don't really see any potential of him getting any sort of use, especially for fantasy football.
Yeah.
We have Dan. He comments Julio going to Tampa and getting on the TB12 method for a year to make a Super Bowl push.
That would be impressive.
He doesn't need anyone else. Tom Brady does not need any other player. He just got Russell Gage. Why does he need?
Quit hogging him, Tom.
You got the Falcons wide receiver 1. They don't need anyone else. All right, now into the meat of things. So today we're gonna be talking about a positionless topic for wide receivers who are more so running the ball. So they're a wide receiver that have a lot more running back type of carries. These type of archetypes are becoming a lot more common in the NFL. It's a copycat league. You saw Deebo Samuel really break out this last year and get a lot of the running back carries. At the beginning, it was kind of out of necessity with Elijah Mitchell going down and not having a ton of options thereafter. But even when Elijah Mitchell came back, Deebo did have a ton of carries. And now you see with McDaniels going over to Miami, he started talking about certain players. He could be implementing that type of scheme in. You have Treylon Burks that's coming into the NFL, and a lot of people are comping him to Deebo. And he even said in one of his press conferences that one of his best assets is the versatility of being able to play a running back, wide receiver, hybrid type of position. So these are players that are going to be much more common and in schemes that are going to be a lot more common going forward. So we're going to be talking about the analytical, statistical, and injury implications of these type of players, because we do have some historical comps over the last 10 years or so on this. So I'll go ahead and take the floor on the players that we've seen these type of archetypes for, and kind of their statistics as well as some of the team repercussions as well as the added advantages of having these type of players for fantasy football. So obviously this last season for 2021, we had Deebo Samuel. He's going to be kind of the prototype going forward for these type of players. 5'11", 220 pounds, has high burst score, high speed, and can play out of the running back position, jet sweeps, etc. So this last year, he had 59 attempts on rushing for 365 yards and 8 touchdowns. When you're thinking about a running back, that doesn't seem like a ton of yards and a ton of opportunities, but that is 84.5 fantasy points altogether for that type of production. And looking at that, for example, Cooper Kupp this last season, who had his historically great season, had 294.5 total fantasy points. So just Deebo Samuel's rushing production alone was 30% of Cooper Kupp's total fantasy points. So, I mean, when you're able to knock 30% of the top wide receivers fantasy production just in rushing production, I mean, that's something definitely to exploit going forward. In terms of his rushing opportunity, so he had 15% of the team's total rushing opportunities. That's just including wide receivers and running backs. out of 445 total team opportunities. The thing that is going to be tricky about this, because a lot of people are wanting to discount running backs in these type of situations, and so they're discounting Elijah Mitchell because he may be taking opportunities away. Debo will. The thing that is going to be concerning is that 14 of Debo's 59 attempts were in the red zone area, and that's 30% of the total team opportunities. So, I mean, that's kind of the gold mine for where you're going to pick up these, players, is when they're getting the red zone opportunities and getting the opportunities to score these touchdowns. And Debo's taking that away from these players. How do you feel about, Debo's opportunities, and him going forward as a player, as well as, based on that information, looking at guys like Elijah Mitchell going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's exciting for Debo. When you lay out those numbers, like you talked about, 30% of the red zone opportunities, that's a pretty alarming a number. I question maybe how sustainable that is with Elijah Mitchell getting another year under his belt. I mean, we talk about Elijah Mitchell, I think he was a 5th round draft pick rookie, and he kind of got vaulted into that starting role for San Francisco early in his career, maybe earlier than San Francisco even wanted him there. You know, I think it's interesting with Debo because he's such a big player. He's obviously very strong and gifted athletically. If you're San Francisco, you have to know that this is somebody that's struggled with some injuries, and maybe in the red zone where things get a little bit tighter, you be more selective with how you use Debo in those play calls. 2022 will be very telling for that, but I'm skeptical, at least for now, just when you consider the fact of what San Francisco's backfield was last year, and maybe Debo, I think he was always going to be used in that role to a certain extent, but maybe had to bite off more than Kyle Shanahan wanted, given the circumstances.
Yeah. That's kind of what I was thinking, is that because of Elijah Mitchell going down, and some of the other players maybe not as talented in the running back position, he's kind of thrusted into that role. But I don't see him going away, and he is a much bigger running back. I mean, Elijah Mitchell is under 200 pounds, and with such a history of these San Francisco running backs in this zone read scheme that they have, it feels like they drop like flies. So maybe having Debo is kind of a red zone option for them going forward. I mean, I do like, I love Elijah Mitchell as a player, and I think he's a really undervalued dynasty asset for where he's going. But there definitely is some concern there for me in terms of what his golden opportunities are when you're talking about the reception production as well as the red zone production because of that.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair point. I don't think you or I are sitting here and saying that Elijah Mitchell has RB1 upside because of that. But there are certain people that are basically writing Elijah Mitchell off because of that Debo Samuel factor. I'd be curious where your stance is. I probably have him slotted in that middle to low end RB2 range with, weekly upside based on how good San Francisco's offense is.
Oh, you're talking about Elijah Mitchell?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I have him. I mean, the thing is, like, even though Debo's taking like 15% of the total rushing opportunities, I mean, San Francisco is going to be running the most in the NFL. So right now I have Elijah Mitchell slated as a top 20 running back for Dynasty.
And I'm good with that. The point I'm trying to make is I think there are people in your leagues, and there are people, fantasy analysts out there, touting kind of staying away from Elijah Mitchell because of that Debo Samuel factor. I don't think he's dead, but like you said, and I think we agree, his upside is certainly capped because of that.
Yeah, like I have him above David Montgomery right now, who's the workhorse in Chicago. So the two things people are scared off of for Elijah Mitchell is that Debo factor as well as the draft capital. I've been saying that it's going to be kind of like the Austin Eckler corollary, where it took everyone a few years to get on the Austin Eckler train because he was a little small and was undrafted at the time. So I think Elijah Mitchell will continue to stay undervalued because of that. But Debo, he's going to see probably 10 to 15% of the rushing opportunities next year. He's going to get a lot of the red zone opportunities next year as well. I mean, I don't see that 84.5 fantasy points from last season fluctuating much this next year, and I think that's a cheat code for looking for these type of players going forward. But some of the other players that have had similar type of production that we've seen and had good seasons because of it. 2011 Percy Harvin, he had 52 attempts, 345 yards, only 2 touchdowns based on that. So that's 15% of the rushing opportunities. In 2015, Tavon Austin, what could have been with him? 52 attempts, 434 yards, 4 touchdowns, 15% of the rushing opportunities. 2020, Curtis Samuel, also what could have been. Maybe we haven't seen the last of Curtis Samuel yet, but he has had so much promise for a while. That season, he had 15% of the team's rushing opportunities, which I don't think a lot of people realize when thinking back to that Carolina Panthers team. And then the lower end of the spectrum, we have 2016 Tyreek Hill and 2020 Robert Woods having 8% and 7% of the rushing opportunities. All these teams, they really didn't. These teams are rushing a lot. When you have a wide receiver that's this involved in the rushing game, you're running. The only exception to this was Curtis Samuel. That Carolina Panthers team only ran the ball 265 times that season, but that was the year that Christian McCaffrey got hurt. Every other time that the team that these players are on are in the top half of the NFL in total rushing attempts. So even though these players are getting opportunities, it's not necessarily taking away from the opportunities of the lead running back on the team.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a good point that you made about in terms of just total rushing offense and why these players are contributing. I think it brings up also another interesting point that we've seen a lot on Twitter is, especially because Deebo Samuel had such an exciting 2021 season. A lot of people want to know who's the next Deebo Samuel, what type of a player. And it seems like now anytime that a team drafts an athlete or some type of wide receiver shows some raw athleticism, we're quick to jump to say, hey, this guy should be used like Deebo Samuel, or this is the next Deebo Samuel. And I think it's a little bit more nuanced than that, than just being athletic. So I'm curious if you have any thoughts on the next Deebo Samuel. If there could be one, is there a next one?
So I've actually muted the phrase "next Deebo Samuel" on
Smart
Twitter.
Man.
Because I'm so tired of it. The fact is, there's probably not going to be a next. Like I think it's going to there's going to be a lot more of these archetypes where you're going to have wide receivers who are running the ball a lot more. But I hate player comps in general. I think that all of a sudden someone compared Treylon Burks to N'Keal Harry, and now he's dropping down everyone's rankings because of it. So I think player comps are stupid. But in terms of a player that we could see have this type of archetype going forward, who's gone from, primarily a receiving type of player to contributing the running game as well. This is kind of my super sleeper for next year as well, is Miami Dolphins Lynn Bowden Jr.
I like it.
I'm actually really excited to see what he can do. His last season at Kentucky in 2019, he had 185 rushes for 1,468 yards, 8 yards per carry. And then also had 30 receptions for 348 yards while he was playing the quarterback position for Kentucky, which is just insane. I knew it was going to take a little while for him to actually get acclimated to the NFL. But you go on to Player Profiler, and you type in the Lynn Bowden profile, and his most comparable player is actually Deebo Samuel on there. Yeah. And
you like that?
And I love a good off-season hype video, right? That gets everyone excited when they see their favorite players get on some hype videos. And there have been 2 hype videos of Tua and Lynn Bowden playing catch together. So the connection is forming, and you got to be excited about that. But you have McDaniels going into Miami, coming from the San Francisco offense. He's been talking a lot about Waddle, but Waddle is currently standing at 5'9", 180 pounds. I don't think that size of player can sustain the rushing production or that type of hybrid role that you'd want someone in that Debo role to play. And Lynn Bowden has, I mean, they haven't cut him yet. And so, I mean, if they haven't cut him yet, and they really haven't made any wide receiver signings at this point besides re-signing Preston Williams, which I mean, that means nothing to me. I don't think he's going to be productive whatsoever, but I think he's going to be a role in this offense. People forget in 2020, he actually had 37 targets and 10 rushing attempts before he got hurt and was out for a little while. So I like Lynn Bowden as a real deep sleeper coming into the next year and being a very, very poor man's Deebo Samuel heading into this next year. But so that's my answer. What about you? Where are you leaning towards on this?
So for me, as we look in the chat here, Dan Bradley says it. Curtis Samuel, correct. Good job, Dan. That would be my guess, and it's really for only the reason that he's kind of done it before. He was injured last year with a core injury, and we'll talk about those injuries a little bit later here. But prior to that, he was being used like Deebo Samuel in Carolina during that 2020 season. When we look at players that have filled that role, I like to see, and we talked about a little bit of, pre-show here, that 10% threshold. So Curtis Samuel was somebody that in that Carolina Panthers offense had 10% of their rushing production and 10% of their rushing carries and 10% of their rushing production. He's one of only 3 players to do that since 2017. It's a small list that consists of him, Tavon Austin, and then Cordell Patterson, 3-peat. But Cordell Patterson's always a running back. We knew that, but that can be a discussion for another day. Right. But I like Curtis Samuel seeing that and already having that in his profile. And then we get into the little coach speak a little bit. He's in Washington with Ron Rivera. So maybe some similar schemes that they can implement. I think he's just a name that was forgotten about because 2021 was such a wash. So you're taking a risk there because we haven't seen him play in such a long time. But I think he's somebody that has a lot of upside if he could chip in that role like he has in the past.
Yeah, man, I have loved Curtis Samuel for so long, and he has been a breakout player for so long for me. Since he's been in the NFL, he has been one of my players that I continually draft very low in drafts, hoping that he's going to break out. I mean, he's pretty good size. A lot of people think he's this really small guy. I mean, he's 5'11", 200 pounds. That's not really small for a player. He runs a 4.3 140. 92nd percentile speed score. He just has had issues staying healthy, and if he can stay on the field, and Washington was really excited about him last year. I remember Ryan Fitzpatrick in an interview because he was supposed to be their QB1 heading into their last season, and he was asked about his receiving options, and he was saying that his best friends are Terry and Curtis when heading into that season. So, I mean, he was excited. Yeah. He was excited about having Curtis Samuel on the team. I love this pick. I just hope he can play a full season.
Yeah, you're definitely buying him on the injury dip. And I think in the right circumstances, I like to scoop those players up. He's going to be a forgotten player. A lot of people have written off Curtis Samuel. There's going to be people in your leagues too that are going to be like, ew, I'm avoiding the Washington Commanders offense because of Carson Wentz. I think it could be an interesting team in a division that's kind of wide open.
Yeah, well, we're giving you all the best players that I'm sure everyone's been thinking about. Curtis Samuel, Lynn Bowden, and then 2 more potential players, Laviska Shenault and Rondale Moore. Just the quadruple threat that you will want to have on your team. Laviska Shenault, I am pretty much out on at this point. Jacksonville has told you what they thought about him by literally paying the most for any wide receiver ever while having the worst talent I've ever seen in Jay Jones and Christian Kirk. And I mean, they have like 10 wide receivers that all stink. So
it's not good.
Laviska and your boy Rondale Moore is their hope.
So, and I think this is a good way to kind of segue into talking a little bit about the injury history, because if we're going to talk about Rondale Moore in this role, I'm a little bit worried. I think Rondale Moore, and especially what he did in college, and trust me, I watched a lot of him in college. He's good at doing some of those jet sweeps, some of those actions where you can get to the outside and then get vertical really quickly. I don't know about him in a running back role. He's a stout player, but at 5'7", 183 pounds, I still think that's asking for him to take more of a beating than he's going to be accustomed to and maybe able to handle over a full season. We talked about with some of those players, Tavon Austin. When Tavon Austin had that high clip of that rushing production, over 10% of the team's carries and rushing yards. Following season, he had a pretty significant groin injury that caused him to miss a good chunk of the season. We just talked about Curtis Samuel last season, 2020, big rushing uptick. Following season, core injury. And then somebody whose college profile was kind of littered with injuries, and he was used extensively in this role we've talked about a bunch, is Laviska Shenault at Colorado. I mean, Colorado totally ran Laviska Shenault into the ground. During his time in college, he had some of the highest usage totals in terms of punt returning, wide receiver usage, kick returning, used as the running back. I think the only player that was used more in his team's total offense was Lynn Bowden Jr. because he played quarterback some during that season at Kentucky. Right. But he's somebody right before he came out into the NFL draft, he had that similar kind of core groin injury that required surgery. It messed up his combine numbers. If you remember, he didn't run the 40, and some people were upset about that. So I think there's it's a small sample. It's definitely a small sample, but we're talking about such a microcosm of some of where these players are slotted in terms of wide receivers being used as running backs. It's something to definitely think about. I think there's some small initial data here that suggests, if not used properly, you're seeing some of these core muscle injuries that can be attributed to being overworked, overused. The only player, again, we talked about him, is questionable if he's a wide receiver or not, is Cordell Patterson. He's really been the shining star that's, for the most part, been able to kind of avoid the injury bug while serving as a dual threat wide receiver and running back.
Yeah, and he's also, I mean, but maybe one of the differences too is he's just a much larger human than these other people we're talking about. Yeah. A lot of these other players who have been used as kind of a hybrid wide receiver running back, they are on the smaller side. And one of my theories, I have nothing to back this up, is that when you have these wide receivers playing a running back role and getting these jet sweeps, they're getting hit by the defensive lineman, 350-pound defensive lineman. And I think there is a much bigger difference getting hit by those defensive linemen compared to getting tackled by a cornerback. Do you have anything on that?
I don't have any hard concrete data. I know at Underlying Principles, we try to hit you with some of those numbers to back up those claims. We pride ourselves on being a little more objective with our takes as opposed to subjective. But I think it's just kind of anecdotal, and I would say yes, but it's kind of recency bias. Just watching Deebo Samuel getting smashed in the playoffs. I mean, San Francisco really used him and relied on him heavily throughout the playoffs at the running back position. And if you watch those games, you saw it take a toll on him as they advanced through the playoffs. So I think there is something to be said about that. But in terms of the hardcore data, I don't have anything to really pump that up.
Yeah. And, as you said before, it's a small sample size of players that we have right now who've been utilized in this type of hybrid role. But I suspect, as I said before, with a copycat league, you're going to be seeing a lot more of this going forward and getting closer to positionless football, especially from like the wide receiver and running back positions, potentially even tight ends. You've seen Johnny Smith being run in the jet sweep,
Yeah.
and you'll start to see more athletic tight ends being put in this type of role as well. So we'll probably have a lot more, and maybe we'll be having this discussion again this time next year with a lot more data to back it up.
Can't wait.
But so I guess actionable takeaways from this, obviously players that catch the ball and run the ball are going to be better for fantasy football. And I know
Yeah.
that is just a shocking claim. But just like we like running backs who catch the ball, as catches are worth 60% more than a rush, we also like wide receivers that run the ball.
Yeah. We like points.
We do like points. And so the threshold that we kind of see based on these type of players is that they're going to be getting a little over 10% of the rushing carries for the team. And that's when you're going to be getting when you're looking at a player and where they're being drafted at, that's where you can kind of exploit the value in terms of these type of players. So as we said before, the Curtis Samuel, you're going to get him for nothing. Deebo Samuel's probably for seasonal. I haven't looked. He's probably going to go in like the third round of seasonal leagues for next year. And I still think
you might get some second round too, to be honest with you.
It just
depending
depends
on your league size.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he's going to be, I mean, I see him dropping pretty far in Dynasty too. Just depends on who you're playing with at this point. But I still think he's going to be a value where you take him because of that rushing upside that he already has built into his floor. So, and then you're going to get, some other players that we talked about. I personally am not touching Laviska Shenault. But there's possibility with Lynn Bowden and Rondale Moore, who you're probably going to get for nothing, but could have that additional floor built in if you're really needing someone.
For sure.
All right. So that's kind of the main breakdown there. We are going to move on to our mailbag
Let's do it.
Okay. Original segment. No one's ever done this one before. So glad we can bring this one to the table for you guys weekly. And I actually surprised Adam with these about an hour ago. So he probably has not seen any of these. So
I live football, Blake. I'm ready for this.
You were so welcome. I'm so glad that I did that for you. So first question. So this one is asked by Derek. Who is the most impactful signing for fantasy football so far this offseason?
Ooh. I'm gonna let you take this.
Okay,
i
I'll go ahead and start it. So you can think of your answer. I'm so sorry. And so my answer, the layup answer is Davante Adams for this. I think there's a lot of implications for a lot of different teams. So I think this hurts Aaron Rodgers because he has no one to throw to now. He will be throwing it to himself at this rate, which Noah or David Bakhtiari is going to convert out to tight end or something like that. Derek Carr becomes a top 12 quarterback heading into next year. Davante Adams will continue his success because he is Davante Adams. And Darren Waller now has to compete with targets with someone who is not Bryan Edwards, who stinks. And I am so tired of it being Bryan Edwards season every single year because he is not going to end up being good at any point. So I'm sorry to Bryan Edwards truthers. But there's just a lot of implications there. The other one that I really, really like is Allen Robinson to the Rams, who we did not talk about at the beginning of this show. So a lot of people are scared off right now because they think the Rams have a ton of wide receivers now and are scared for the production of all of them. But they have not signed OBJ yet. He is still a free agent heading into this next year. And then he probably won't even play this next year for a very long time. And then you don't even know what Robert Woods is. I mean, Robert Woods is getting up. He's 31 years old, I believe. 29, 30, 31,
That
something
sounds
like that.
right. Yeah.
He just tore his ACL. He's not even guaranteed to be back for the beginning of this next year. I mean, it could be the Cooper Kupp and Allen Robinson show heading into next year, which I am so excited about because I have loved Allen Robinson for a very long time, and I'm excited that he gets an actual good quarterback throwing him the ball.
We might need to add Robert Woods to that kind of injury-riddled season following a lot of rushing production. 2020 saw 7% of the Rams rushing opportunities. Next year tears his ACL. I'm just saying it's, again, a lot of anecdotal evidence, but something that might be there with some of these guys that might not be able to sustain that type of rushing workload. For my answer, I mean, I'm gonna go kind of two here. We talked a lot about it on the last show, and if people listened last week, I'm not gonna just beat that point home, but I think it's Russell Wilson just for those wide receivers in Denver. We're fans of Cortland Sutton on this show. We talked about how during his time in Denver, his team's QBR has been basically bottom of the half of the league, and it got a major uptick. Russell Wilson's been top 10 in the league. So for Jerry Jeudy and specifically Cortland Sutton, darling of the show, I think it's a big one. The other one that's kind of interesting that I wanted to get your brief feedback on here is J.D. McKissick kind of pulling the one over on us, signing with Buffalo and then saying, "Psych, I'm coming back to Washington." I know we got a lot of Antonio Gibson truthers out there that were wanting that receiving production, and now McKissick's back.
I'm gonna give people a peek behind the curtain here. So we were actually supposed to talk about this in the news segment at the very beginning, but I'm so spiteful towards JD McKissick that I totally skipped over it. I'm so mad about this situation. I know the answer is if you are in on Antonio Gibson and you are scared that JD McKissick is going to be the reason for his downfall, then it wasn't actually Antonio Gibson's season to begin with. But he gets these third down. Antonio Gibson was a wide receiver in college. He has pass catching capability. And for some reason, these teams, they have these first down, second down, third down packages. And Jay McKissick is the third down package running back. And so he will continue to play that third down role. I don't think it's because Antonio Gibson can't. It's because that's just the way that the coaches scheme him in. So it is very – go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that's true. I think there's always going to be a role for J.D. McKissick. The only part of optimism that I would encourage fantasy managers to think about is Antonio Gibson was dealing with like a major shin injury last year, a fracture pretty much for most of the season. So much so that it wouldn't – I mean, it's certainly plausible that Washington had him on some type of pitch count, regardless of whether it was receiving or rushing production on that team. They probably saw him as the most viable rushing option, so they prioritized him for those type of carries and limited some of his receiving work because of that and because they had a healthy J.D. McKissick. But again, I think similar to like we talked about limiting upside with like Elijah Mitchell, I think J.D. McKissick does that to a certain extent to Antonio Gibson. Not as much, but I think to a certain extent it does hurt the upside.
So frustrating, man. It feels like once again Antonio Gibson's going to be game script dependent heading into this next season until I'm proved otherwise on that. But it's very frustrating overall.
I hear you.
Good job, JD McKissick, for pulling a fast one on everyone, getting everyone excited for the Buffalo signing, and then pulling the rug.
Yeah, that wasn't fun. I was mad about that.
All right. Next question from Jackamus Prime on the Undroppables Discord.
Wow, nice name.
What is the best landing spot for Breece Hall?
I'll take this one first. It's kind of the low-hanging fruit. I'm going to just say Tampa Bay. And that hurts me a little bit because I do like Keyshawn Vaughn, and I have some Keyshawn Vaughn shares. But depending on kind of what Leonard Fournette's situation is, Tom Brady kind of pulling a J.D. McKissick on us as well and reversing there. I think the gang's coming back for the most part. You could see a lot of touchdowns for Breece Hall if he landed in Tampa.
And is Breece Hall your RB1?
Absolutely, without a doubt.
Just want to make sure.
Is he yours?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
and it's not very close either. I think he's going to be unbelievable coming into the NFL, and I think he's going to end up getting some better draft capital than people think. I think he could be creeping into that first round range for some of these teams that are going to be end of the first round. You saw like the Chiefs do it a couple years ago with Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
Whoops.
Yeah, big whoops. I still am so sad looking at the running backs that were taken after him. But I could see a team like the Bills or someone who's kind of at the end of the draft taking him in that first round. But the team who I thought it was going to be originally to get him was the Dolphins. But they decided to sign every average running back that they could possibly find.
Yeah,
with Raheem Mostert and Chase Edmonds, and they just got them all. They got every average running back they could find.
They're just going to throw them out there and see which one sticks, man.
See which one stays healthy.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's going to be the Dolphins anymore. I think the obvious spot is Seattle. They traded for that 109 from the Denver Broncos. And I can see Pete Carroll with his chewing his gum at the 9th overall pick in the draft and staring down Breece Hall's name and saying, maybe.
That would be a glorious day on Twitter. I would literally crack open a beer, put my feet up, and just watch the world burn. If Pete Carroll traded Russell Wilson for Breece Hall, and we like Breece Hall, we like Breece Hall, but there's no defensible way that you should be taking a running back in the top 10.
I just want a close up of him in the war room, both hands on his knees, just chewing his gum as hard as possible as they announce Breece Hall at the 109.
I can see it.
But so I think they'll take him probably in the second round is where they would get him at. They haven't re-signed Penny yet. That's kind of the anticipation as they do that. But if they don't, they really don't have a lot of options that are good. My dark horse landing spot that I got some kickback on today in the Discord is the LA Chargers. So everyone loves Austin Eckler. I love Austin Eckler. I don't think the Chargers are wanting to use him as much as they have been. He is still a small back, and he is super efficient and very productive for them. And they don't. It's for a while they wanted to try and have that like thunder and lightning type of player, that 1A and 1B. And right now, Justin Jackson is a free agent who was kind of their backup. And the only option they have left is Larry Roundtree III, who had 2.8 yards per carry last season. And I don't think is going to be the answer as their backup. So it looks like the Chargers are building their defense through free agency. So you could see them taking a lot of offensive players here in the draft. And I think they are a dark horse team to land Breece Hall with kind of a luxury pick in the second round.
I like it all. I think all those would be some good spots for Breece Hall, certainly for fantasy.
All right. Last question. I also did not write down who asked this question, so I am sorry once again. I will get better at that going forward. Best realistic decision for Indianapolis at quarterback for this next season. I will go ahead.
Are we talking draft or free agency?
It can be either at this point. I personally don't see them going for someone in the draft because I think they believe they're a win now team. With having Jonathan Taylor and having a pretty good offensive line and a good defense.
They also do they have a first round pick?
I would imagine so. Maybe they don't.
Okay. Maybe
you filibuster while I look it up.
They do. It was a second round pick that they traded for Carson Wentz. It was a second round pick.
Yes.
Best for the Colts. Do you have somebody specifically in mind that you were?
So yes, I believe. Okay, actually, it doesn't look like they do have a first round pick. They have the 42nd overall pick and the 73rd overall pick in the second and third rounds.
Yeah, so they're probably not taking a quarterback then.
No, probably not. And if they are, it's going to be like a Desmond Ridder or someone like that who probably isn't ready to go off the bat. My two players who I think is the best possibility is Jameis Winston So he looked really good for the Saints last year and kind of playing this dink and dunk kind of. I mean, for Tampa Bay, he was launching the ball wherever he possibly could and having insane stats while also having insane interceptions. He was really good at, kind of scaling that back and playing more of a game manager type of role, which I think Indianapolis is going to kind of look for, setting that foundation with Jonathan Taylor running the ball and just looking for someone who won't turn the ball over and won't do what Carson Wentz did at the end of the season, which you could totally see Jameis Winston doing the exact same thing. But I mean, why not? I think he looks really good. The most likely that I think it's going to be someone closer to like Tyrod Taylor or someone like that. I think he kind of fits their scheme when he was with Buffalo that one season. I think it was Buffalo, right? Where he took them to the playoffs and he just kind of dink and dunked his way to some pretty good stats with a good defense. And I think someone like that is probably a little more realistic with what they're going to end up with starting the season. A starting caliber quarterback who isn't going to really win you anything outside of getting you to the playoffs. But that may not actually happen in the AFC at this point. So that's who I think it's going to be. I think Jameis's best possible outcome, and Tyrod Taylor is probably the most realistic at this point.
So, I mean, it's getting bleak. I think I saw the other day, and this one probably didn't get mentioned. I think Tyrod landed with the Giants. So I think he's backing up. He's backing up Daniel Jones now.
Yep,
Giants. That one got lost in the shuffle for sure because it's just not a marquee name. I like the Winston take. It's definitely getting bleak out there for the Colts. I mean, I would have thought they had a plan when they traded away Carson Wentz, but they haven't really done anything. I'm a little bit nervous that after you talked about some of those options that they might draft someone like a Desmond Ridder and think that that's going to be the solution. I could see I'm blanking Chris Ballard, the Colts GM. I think fans of the Colts and kind of in general NFL community, they've gotten the sense that Chris Ballard is really a sharp, and he hasn't made a lot of great decisions so far for that franchise. I could see somebody like him just falling in love with the Desmond Ridder and then, having the hubris to talk him into it and playing it. Yeah. So I think for Colts' sake, somebody like Jameis Winston would make a lot of sense. And especially if they could get some more weapons in that Colts passing game, which I think they're definitely going to be taking some wide receivers early based on the stuff that I've read. That could be a good option.
I have the answer. I know who it's going to be.
Let's hear it.
Free agent, 34-year-old Andy Dalton.
Yuck.
Or Jacoby Brissett. Maybe they'll bring Jacoby Brissett back because right now the available players that we have on free agency is Andy Dalton, Cam Newton, Jameis Winston, Jacoby Brissett, Marcus Mariota, Blaine Gabbert, Geno Smith, and a whole lot of nothing after that.
Yeah, it's not good. It's not
good. If that's what you're relying on going into next season, you're not feeling too great about yourself with no first-round pick.
Yeah, I don't know what else to say. I mean,
I'm sorry, Colts fans. You had the chance to get Mitch Trubisky. You had the chance.
Yeah.
That's all we got, man. That's all we got for the show today.
Another one down.
Any last words on your end?
No. Just if you've been following the show or you like it, send us those mailbag questions kind of at the end, and we appreciate you tuning in for any of the show. You can find me on Twitter. My Twitter handle's there at @TheRealAdam_H. Producing in-season content for 4for4 fantasy football, but trying to host a show weekly here with my buddy Blake, cracking down on underlying principles.
Yeah, man. Appreciate you being on here as always. You can find me on Twitter at Blake A. Hampton. All my content's at The Undroppables. We're building a lot of cool stuff over there. So go ahead and check us out if you have a chance. We'll be back here next week. We're going to do it again. And it's going to be great. So I'll see you then, man.
All right, man. Till next time.
Yep. See you guys.
Peace.